Welcome to episode 347 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. Joining me in a moment is Alan Barrie. Alan is the chair of Stamp Free, and we're going to talk about some research commissioned by Stamp Free into some of the major delivery sector trends that are out there. We're going to get in depth on some of these trends with Alan, who of course is a well-known industry expert. We're going to talk about what Stamp Free does as well. So stay tuned for a fascinating discussion brought to you by Stamp Free. Alan Barrie, chair of Stamp Free, talking about some of these major delivery sector trends. Joining me on the line is Alan Barrie. Alan is the chair of Stamp Free and a well-known postal and delivery figure. Alan, we're going to talk about Stamp Free a bit later on, but before we do, let's just talk a little bit about some research that Stamp Free recently sponsored, triggered, whatever the right word is, on some trends in the postal and parcel industry. In fact, it's called the Parcel, I'll get it right in a second, everyone, the Postal and Parcel Trend Report 2024. Why don't we just talk about some of the main themes that are coming out of this report, Alan? One of them is about competition and market share and how this is shaping up as to being a major challenge for the postal and parcel delivery sector. From your perspective, what have you seen when it comes to industry players striving for market share?
Yeah, morning, Ian. It's very, very interesting at the moment. I think it's one of the most dynamic times that we've had in the industry. If you look at what's happened in the last few years, it's been total roller coaster, up and down with COVID boosts of volumes, this, that, the next thing. We're now seeing a period where, having got through that, and they did, most of the operators have to find a way through it, that things are starting to change. If you look at the UK market, for example, there's no dominant player. There are big players in there, but there's quite a spread. It's a highly competitive environment. So Royal Mail's still the biggest operator, but you look at Every, DPD, Yodel, and of course the big beast Amazon coming along at the side. It's clearly quite dynamic. Then you throw on top of that some of the new players. InPost, just a locker company, no. InPost are out to eat the carrier's lunch. They are buying end-to-end capability. Their share in Menzies shows their intent, just as they've done with Mondial Relay in France. They are pure end-to-end, but working on a simplified delivery model. So it's kind of helping to trigger a new dynamic in the marketplace. So UK is a good example of a well-established and advanced, supposedly, e-commerce market moving into the next phase.
Why is there such competition at the moment?
Well, I think it's growth, it's scale. This is a massive market with more potential. So it was growing at 10% per annum pre-COVID, big boost during COVID, then a wobble downwards. The view is it's going to carry on in its steady growth at this stage. So it's very, very big business with potential to grow further. But it's got a few structural issues, I think, just now, which create vulnerability for the incumbents overall and opportunity for some of the new players who perhaps don't have that impediment of traditional infrastructures. So the older players have to transform and move on and manage decline of old business, whilst the new players come in clean. And they can come in clean and put down a new footprint. So I think that's the kind of the dynamic that we're seeing playing. And around the world, we're seeing a number of the incumbents doing very well in the way they develop their capability, and they've made clear decisions about some of the areas they're going to move to, but all of them have got the same fundamental challenge. So interesting stuff. Amazon's probably the most interesting of all of them. But even Amazon in the UK, as it grows its out-of-home footprint, is finding some impediments to that. It's not as easy to get close to the chimneys as even Amazon would like. They find that access to private space is great, private networks is great, but getting into public space close to where people live, work, etc., is a tricky task.
Talking about access points then, Alan, You're talking about getting, you call it close to chimneys or close to gas flues, I suppose,
Yeah,
if you're in
possibly.
certain parts of the world. Close to air conditioning units if you're in
Yeah.
Queensland. There you go. Now, the getting that kind of network is one part of what we're seeing a lot of delivery companies doing, private carriers, publicly owned, postal operators and the like. But there's a whole range of digital things as well that are the other side of this as far as I can see. It's not just about the last mile, it's also about the technology that underpins it. So how does that all fit into this idea of transformation then?
It's part of that morphing of the industry where people traditionally took parcels to a post office, or a shipper took a lorry and took it into a distribution centre. And that's the way it worked. Things are starting to change now where more and more people, things like C2C growth, are fundamentally changing the way people want to interface and interact with an industry. So you're finding people with one item or a few items looking to access the system, and they find this cumbersome approach which isn't consumer friendly. They don't really want to stand in a queue in a shop. They'd rather interface with something simple where they can do their business very quickly. Yeah, so that's kind of fueled things. At the same side, you're finding your carrier saying, we're in a situation where we have to, in the UK, deliver to 32 million places and have the capability of doing that. In London, the ability to deliver to 3.5 million places, houses, addresses. That's an expensive business. If we had a point-to-point solution of several thousand locations, then that would be a lot easier for consumers. It'd be a lot more efficient for us. And potentially, and the important point that comes out of this particular survey, the insight is that also, if it has the magic third item, it's a more sustainable way of doing things. It reduces consumption if you have to go to thousands of places rather than millions of places. So you've got three things playing there: customer convenience, sustainability overall, and business efficiency moving forward. So these are the three things that are starting to change people's view of access points. And the first traditional simple way of doing things was to go to shops. Great. If you happen to be in there on pension day in a post office, when the kids come out of school, at a newsagent's or whatever, you're unlucky. It's not as convenient as you'd want it to be. And that's why other solutions like lockers are coming in and other self-service solutions. So big changes.
What about data then? Because when we talk about data, it can seem like a very nebulous concept that's not very sexy. And yet, you've just mentioned some figures there, which means there's a whole load of data going around in the background, not just about getting the address data right, understanding people's delivery preferences, those sorts of things. So when we talk about digitalisation as a trend then, do you see digitalisation continuing to have an impact on the delivery sector, or is it something we haven't yet realised the impact of what digitalisation could do for the delivery world?
It's interesting. Not so very long ago, I spent some time at Harvard on a big data course with some of the great and the good with American industry, but beyond that as well. It really was a fascinating event in my life. Kind of opened my eyes to the potential. But interestingly, when they started looking at the case I was talking about, which was international cross-border data capture from an IPC perspective, they were fascinated by it. They saw an increasingly data-rich environment with serious under-leveraging of the data that was contained within it. Also some gaps in that data. And I moved that discussion on to the boardroom of IPC with 12 of the major CEOs in the world and talked about the importance of accurate, clean data captured at source to actually fire future systems and future operations. So it's a digital discussion as opposed to a physical and operational discussion. And that was the moment, I think, in that room that it was decided that the new interconnect services that were being developed and the new digital platform that was being developed for them globally needed to have as much important on the measurement and feedback on the accuracy and effectiveness of the data side as it did on the operational performance side. So I think it was a little bit of an eye-opener, and it certainly was for me at that stage. And it's exactly the same thing in all of the domestic environments now, except now with AI thrown into the mix. You can throw in all sorts of data feeds into this and make it even more dynamic. And the computing power now has just moved on a level even from that discussion.
Now, my next question may seem a little bit naive, Alan, but when you talk about capturing the data at the source, we in the postal sector, we didn't seem to really pay a lot of attention to those C2C parcels and getting the data right for them. But as we've seen some of these platforms grow in popularity, the likes of Vinted or Wallapop or whoever it might be, as they continue to grow in popularity, those volumes are continuing to grow. Does that mean that the importance of getting data right for C2C parcels has grown as part of this whole digitization?
Yeah, and it's just the same. If you think, well, what is the data? If you break it down into its components, what is the data that we're talking about? So it's, where's it come from? Yeah, where's it going to? What's in it? What's its weight? All of these things, what's its size? There are a number of things. These are all just data elements. They tend to manifest themselves in a traditional parcel world as a label. Yeah, so all that a label is a physical manifestation of the source data. Yeah, that's all it is. It's a way of displaying the source data and adding a unique identifier to it so people can associate the data with the item. Yeah, and the item with the consignment, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all important aspects. They've got to be linked up. And the realization that the earlier you can get complete and clean data into the system and then add to it by adding data linked to what happens to it thereafter is power. Power to optimize, the power to communicate what's happening with that item, notify customers so they are well aware what's happening with those items. But it all comes from the very beginning, which is why, from a sales perspective, the best deals should be made available to the people who provide the clean and complete data to allow people to provide the best possible service, because all of these elements contribute to the services that the postal companies, the parcel carriers provide.
So the message here, everybody, is that data is power. You've heard it here. Data is power. So we've talked about some of these major themes here. We've talked about the competition, the striving to be convenient, and then the digitization, and all of this is underpinning the ideas of transformation, meeting the consumer's needs, all of these sorts of things. We need really, Alan, to talk a bit about what stamp-free is, because I get the feeling that these elements are important to what stamp-free does. So can you just give a really quick overview of what stamp-free is, and then we can dive into some in these individual elements?
Yes, I mean, stamp-free concept is why I was interested in the first place. It was really just a view that, well, it's about the cumbersome nature of accessing postal services, and there's got to be an easier way to do it. I quite like things where there's a question at the front, which is, surely there's an easier way of doing this. And is it really about sticking things on things at the end of the day? And it's linked into that data capture at source. I would call it pre-validation. Yeah. So if you're going to provide an excellent service, you need to have all of the information guaranteed upfront. So when Hugh Craigie-Hackett came to me and talked to me about it in the first place, I thought, this is interesting. And it was just a concept. And now they've applied some very, very clever technology, some really, really good OCR, AI technology at the front end. So they've taken a clever idea, applied some really good technology, and it does provide the things that an industry needs. So in terms of convenience, and that's what it's all about, this is about making it easier for customers so that customers can, at home, post an item without requiring to have a physical bit of paper somehow to stick on it. Yep. I returned an item recently. I had 4 pieces of paper printed off. I then got the sellotape. I then got the scissors out, and I applied all of the things to the item, took it to my local newsagents, who then said, sorry, this one doesn't work. And I thought, really? It was such a bad experience overall. It was like, older people will remember Blue Peter It was like I was sitting in the middle of a Blue Peter, make something up with squeezy bottle situation. And that's not the way you should be posting a parcel. You can do it all with your phone. As long as you've got a pen, you're ready to go. So Stamp Free is about convenience, allowing people to post parcels, returns posted without the need to have a label. It's all at a digital level, and then the receiving carrier deals with that. When they pick up the physical item, they then have the source data available to them with a unique identifier. They join the dots and the parcel carries on its normal way. Recent research in the UK shows that with posted, the way C2C is developing, with posted items and with return items, up to 50% of items are posted without a label on them. So a third party somewhere down the line has to apply that physical label if the operation requires it. And they've got to generate that label from some kind of unique identifier. Stamp Free does it in a unique way where it's done with a simple code which is attached to the item. If you can access that item, you can access the data.
So we're talking about, in this instance, if Alan's returning a parcel, Alan's bought something online, he doesn't like the colour because the colour doesn't match his eyes or whatever the case may be. And instead of printing out a label or printing something out and then gluing it to a parcel, you're able to just write a code on. Is that right? Okay.
You write a code on. The key to writing the code is that you've put in all of the data in advance. Very simple.
So you've gone online and you've generated a code by virtue of entering all the data correctly. Yeah. So what's the next step in a practical sense? So we can see now from the consumer's perspective, the consumer's able to do this in a fairly seamless way, and then they're either going to leave it by their front door for collection or take it into a PUDO or take it into a post office or wherever. What happens next?
Well, the next point, at that receipt point, then you actually put it into the locker, or you take it to the PUDO, as you say. At that point, there's a decision to be made. Either at the locker, you'll be able to use that code to generate a label, if there's a label printer there, or not. And this is the key point now, because increasingly, lockers are arriving with very, very simple approaches. They don't have many bolt-on technologies. The simpler, the better seems to be the trend. So you can either take the risk of the label printer working at a locker, or you can access the locker with your code. The locker is expecting it. The smart locker is expecting it. That's then picked up by the driver who scans it. We know we've got the item. Then he takes it into the collection point, and at that point, the label is applied. So the label's got to be applied somewhere. It's either done in a post office, in a Collect Plus unit, at a locker, should there be a label printer there. I don't like the idea of remote label printers personally, but then you apply the label down the line. So simple from the consumer's perspective. Everything's convenient, everything's digital, no playing around with scissors and sellotape. They take it along and the carrier deals with it from there. So that's the simple idea.
So what you're talking about here, though, Alan, is not just removing one pain point. You're actually talking about removing a number of pain points here, because you've mentioned almost in passing there about label printers and parcel lockers. And we've known for decades that, the stamp vending machines and all those sorts of things that are out exposed to the elements generally don't perform to their optimum level, perhaps. So if you remove, and also the cost involved. Every time you have to put I'm editorializing a little bit here, everybody, but if you have to take the space of a locker with a parcel, with a barcode printer, that's one less cell in the locker. Does that make sense? Have I explained myself very well, Alan?
Well, you have. I mean, the simpler the better. Again, as you get to veteran stage, you realize you want to reduce the number of points of failure in technology. From my perspective, when you look at the electromechanical side of it, supported by the data, the electromechanical side of it's got to be simple, especially if it's isolated and on its own. There isn't somebody there to keep an eye on it. So you want to keep it simple and effective so that there is a very, very high level of availability to the end consumer. The more you put on it, the more there is to go wrong. Yeah, in my view. So that could be a screen, it could be a printer, yeah, it could be a coffee maker. I don't know. But the more you put on it, the more it could potentially go wrong from a consumer's perspective. It's no great surprise to see that the biggest deployer of lockers in the United Kingdom and many other markets, Amazon, is now deploying screenless, battery powered, no printer lockers. Yeah, so as simple as you can get. If you look at the massive growth in the Baltics and the Nordics, the vast majority of the Nordic solutions are very simple, no screen. Yeah, you're carrying a screen, and that's the principle. There's a screen in your hand, use that. Let's have the fewest number of moving parts in what is an electromechanical physical solution, and then you get the highest chance of this working. Easy to use, reliable solutions that you can interact with your mobile phone.
The idea of writing a number on a letter to represent postage has been done by a couple of postal operators in the past. Yeah. But if I've understood correctly, Alan, what we're talking about here is not just replacing a stamp with a code. It's a bit more than that in terms of data collection and those sorts of things. So when we sort of get underneath the hood, as the Americans would say, underneath the bonnet for the rest of us, of this sort of technology, is that what is really going on? It's not just about replacing a stamp with a cash transaction at the post office counter with a digital transaction and writing a code. It's a bit more than that. Is that right?
Definitely, Ian. You're right on the money as far as that's concerned. So, yeah, you can write a code on something, but the whole point here is about the pre-validation. It's that guarantee to the carrier that it's clean, it's complete, and you're assured. You know this is an expected paid-for item. Yep, it's just that all you got to do is link the two up. Yep, so the data and the physical item. Yep, that's the convergence here. If it's got a code in it, by definition, you have the complete data. No complete data, no code. Yep, so that's liquid gold to a carrier, that they have that advanced notification of what's coming, and they know that it's high quality data. So that's the hub of the whole thing.
Alan, coming back to our very first discussion point in all of this, we were talking about the competition in the parcel sector, striving for market share. So how does this sort of tool apply? How does the stamp-free solution fit into that?
At the end of the day, you're only going to retain that market share if you keep moving the product along and keep moving the way that your consumers deal with you along. Yeah, make it easier, more convenient to them. So this is about frictionless services at the end of the day. So you've got to actually break down what are you asking people to do here. It's also about how do you make it easy for the person who's dealing with your customers. So from a delivery driver, a pickup driver, how do you make it easy for them? Are you really asking them to stick something onto an item, etc.? No, scan and contain, scan and contain. Keep it as simple as possible for the customer, for the driver, and then if you've got the join up, that integration point where the physical and the digital converge, that's the point that you add value. You turn it into a standard labeled item at that point. So it's all about convenience, and that's why we're looking to make sure that we can do this through the Stamp Free app, that we can do this through integration into carriers' apps, and the real breakthrough in what we're doing now is actually making it available on WhatsApp. 3 billion users worldwide. So how easy can that be? You don't even have to download an app. You already have it, or most people do. So it's about ease at the end of the day, and it's about, I think, an attitude of the postal players to say, we've got a hell of a lot to do. We need to transform our business end to end. Which bits do we do, and where do we partner well? And how do we provide a range of solutions? Because one single solution, a traditional view, ain't going to work. You've got to open up a number of doors or windows into your services. And this is one. This won't be the only one. but this is a convenient way for people to use what they've already got, a phone and a pen, and that's all you need to be able to access the services. So it's an attitude of mind, I think, and I think that there's an opening up in the marketplace to say, where somebody has put some thought to this and has come up with a solution, let's integrate and partner. And that's a rapid way to actually add a new dimension that your consumers, your front-end operatives can use.
Alan, we've covered plenty of territory there, and I reckon there are going to be lots of questions from listeners about Stamp Free and how it could be integrated into their delivery offerings. Alan, if people want to find out more about Stamp Free, where should they go? Who should they contact?
Well, that's dead simple. You just go to stampfree.ai and you'll get all of the information there, all of the contact points there. But if you know me, just give me a call.
There we go. If you know Alan, ring him. Otherwise, stampfree.ai, and you'll be able to follow the links there to get in contact with the team. Alan Barrie, Chair at Stamp Free, thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today. That's all for this episode of the Postal Hub podcast. Please do subscribe to the podcast in your favourite podcast platform, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts or one of the many reputable and wonderful podcast platforms out there. Please also subscribe to the Postal Hub email newsletter. Go to thepostalhub.com and follow the links. I send out an email every time there's a new episode, and I also send out an email pretty much every business day called the Daily Delivery Digest, which has delivery news from around the world. Subscribe to these great email. Great. I mean, I do them. That's why I think they're great. Subscribe to these fabulous, these wonderful, these life-changing email newsletters at thepostalhub.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn as well. Costs nothing. You don't have to send me a connection request or anything like that. So don't be shy. Just find me, Ian Kerr, on LinkedIn and follow me. And I post interesting stuff now and then. Better than most of the AI-generated rubbish that's out there right now. Better than all of the AI-generated rubbish. I'm going to make the call, everybody. What I put out is better than AI-generated rubbish. Make of that what you will, everyone. What else can I say? If you want to email me, my email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.